Hello, today we're going to be talking about giving effective feedback. Giving feedback is one of the most powerful ways to influence people's behavior. So, it's a leadership course. We're talking about influencing people towards a goal. Feedback is a way to influence people's behavior. Many of us avoid giving feedback, especially critical feedback, because it makes us feel uncomfortable. I had a roommate in grad school who was not very conscientious about doing his dishes in a timely manner. And instead of going up to him and having a discussion with him about this, I just over time built up this self righteous contempt where I had this story in my head that I was the greatest roommate ever because I did my dishes in a timely manner, and he was the great Satan because he didn't, right? And I just kind of let it build up inside me until I snapped at him one day, and he had no idea where it was coming from because instead of bringing it up when it was first became an issue, I let it build up over time. And we often do that. Instead of giving people feedback about their performance, we don't give them feedback and then we hold it against them that they're not changing their behaviors. But he had no idea that he was bothering me by not doing his dishes more quickly, right? I hadn't given him that feedback, so he didn't know. I ask students why they think it's difficult to give people critical feedback, and I always receive the same response, which is that I don't like conflict. I try to avoid conflict, and I think that is part of the story, but I don't think that is the whole story. I think that a big reason that people avoid giving critical feedback is that when you give people critical feedback, it's actually a very vulnerable thing to do for the person giving feedback. When you give people critical feedback, essentially what you are saying is, I need something from you that you're not giving me. Like with my roommate with the dishes, I needed a clean kitchen to feel comfortable in my own home. I needed a clean kitchen to be able to cook my meals. I needed something from him. And by giving him critical feedback on that, I was essentially asking him to do something for me. And we don't like to ask people to do things for us. That makes us feel vulnerable. And you can see this when you're on a group project and you have a group member that's slacking. Instead of addressing that with them explicitly, instead, what you often do is think to yourself, I don't need them. I can do it myself. And that's essentially the exact opposite of vulnerability, right? Vulnerability would be, hey, I need your help to get this project done. Can you please improve your performance? But by saying, hey, I can just do it myself, you're taking this kind of invulnerable, I'm strong enough, I don't need other people's help kind of stance. So I do think avoiding conflict is a part of it, but I also think that giving other people critical feedback makes us feel vulnerable because we're asking for something.
Today we're talking about delivering effective feedback, and we're going to talk about 6 principles that we use to do that. The first is to establish trust. The next is to pick an appropriate time, to begin by listening, praise more than we criticize, to give specific feedback, and then to agree on SMART goals.
We'll start by talking about establishing trust. When I'm talking about trust in this scenario, what I mean specifically is the other person has to believe that you have their best interests in mind when you're giving them feedback, that you care about their performance, their improvement, whatever it is. And that is why you're giving them feedback, because you have their best interests in mind. That sounds really obvious, but there are actually a lot of reasons that we give feedback, and few of them have to do with having the other person's best interest in mind. So one reason we give feedback is to show off how smart we are, to show that, hey, we know how to do something better than you. The perfect example of this is people that are pedantic. Pedantic people don't actually care about improving your grammar or your pronunciation or whatever it is that they're critiquing. They just want to show that they know some esoteric language rule that you don't. They want to show off how smart they are. And that's why we find pedantic people so annoying, is because we know that they're not giving us feedback because they care about us. They're giving us feedback because it's an opportunity for them to show off. Another reason we sometimes use, quote, feedback as an opportunity to vent when we're frustrated with people. I had a teaching assistant at one point in time who she just gave me so much attitude whenever I asked her to do the simplest thing. She'd just be like, oh, like I was asking her to do something completely inappropriate. And everything I asked her to do was well within her job description. So during the middle of the semester, I brought her in for an evaluation, and it was this like half-hour meeting where I essentially just vented at her about how frustrating she was and how much she irritated me and everything she did that bothered me. As you can imagine, the second half of the semester was much, much worse than the first half of the semester, and she just completely disengaged and gave up on me. It is okay to vent about people that frustrated you. Do not vent to the person who frustrates you. That's not conducive to improving their performance. That's not conducive to improving your guys' relationship. You should focus on behaviors, focus on making the other person perform better when you're giving feedback, not to make you feel better about being frustrated by them. Um, if people don't trust your motivation for providing feedback, then they become defensive. Um, and instead of listening to you and being open to changing their behavior, when they feel like they're being attacked, then they defend their behavior. And if they're defending their behavior, if they're justifying it or explaining it, then they obviously can't be open to changing that behavior, right? So when people feel attacked, they get defensive and then they're not open to change, which is the exact opposite of what you're trying to do when you give people feedback. You're hoping that they will be open to change.